Welcome back to Houston Real Estate Radio. I'm your host, Shannon Register, and this week we are broadcasting from the NRG Center. We are at the New Home and Remodeling Show, sponsored by the Greater Houston Builders Association, and we are broadcasting from the Zeus Mortgage booth. Lots of people milling around here this weekend. It's been a great show, and this segment, I want to talk to Judge Jay Karahan. He is the judge of the Harris County Criminal Court at Law number 8, and we're going to talk about some interesting things that you may want to be aware of, especially if you are a landlord. So welcome to the show, Judge Jay.
Thanks, Shannon. How are you today?
I am doing great. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
So let's talk about some issues that are facing homeowners, things that they may not be aware of.
Well, homeowners have an important interest in maintaining their property values, of course, and especially while the home is being built or during remodeling times. There are certain building materials left around the work site and so forth, and they want to make sure that these things are kept safe for the workmen to use in the building and the reconstructing of the homes. So homeowners need to know that they are protected by our criminal laws, the penal code, from theft and unlawful entry onto their property, and that if something does happen on their property, they should call the police immediately, make a police report, make sure it's properly investigated so that the district attorney's office can have enough evidence to prosecute. Yes.
Yeah, that's important. You know, I think that the more criminals get away with things, the more they do it. So it's so important to report everything.
Absolutely.
Even if you think, oh, they'll never catch that guy, still report it so we have a record of it.
Absolutely. And there's also homeowners have an interest in wanting to make sure that you know their pools are properly put in and properly protected so that there's much safety and the risk of something bad happening is very, very low or non-existent. So those are important things they need to look at. They also want to make sure if they're renting their property out that their tenants are properly vetted and background checked.
Yeah, let's talk about that because, you know, it's so important when you're a landlord, and a lot of landlords don't use a property management company. They want to do it themselves, and it's so important that you know the laws and you know how to protect yourself.
That's correct.
So somebody, you know, if somebody wanders onto the property and drowns in the pool, is it the tenant's responsibility? Is it the owner's responsibility?
It could be both of their responsibility. In Texas, we have what's called contributory negligence. So both the landlord, who is the off-site party, if they have set up a situation that increases the risk of
didn't have proper latching gates, something like that.
That's correct. And then the tenant could also be held liable in a situation like that. If they have left the gate open or propped it open and without the landlord's knowledge, and both of them could be brought into the lawsuit depending on how things shake out. One or both of them could be held liable.
One of the things we were talking about before the show, Clean Water Act violations, and I'm going to let you tell me what is that. But a question that I have about that is if the tenant were to violate that, does that reflect on the landlord as well? Could that be a landlord problem?
If the landlord is aware that the tenant is engaging in acts or activities on the property that would create a risk of the water supply being adulterated by volatiles like gasoline and oil, because some folks want to change their own oil on the property, and some oil gets on the driveway. And the tenant sprays it off and has this go down the drain or the bar ditch, they could be held criminally liable for violating the Clean Water Act. We had a case that was tried in our court about 7 or 8 years ago where a young man who was living in the Heights had just bought an antique car and wanted to clean out the gas engine. So he sprayed out the engine and all of this old gas and crud went down the driveway into the bar ditch, and the neighbors had called the police. The police sent hazmat there. Hazmat did what they could to soak this stuff up, and they sent the guy a bill for the cost, and it was something in the neighborhood of $3,000 or $4,000 to do the cleanup. And the young man did not pay the money, and then they went and sought charges with the district attorney's office, who filed charges. We tried the case, and he was found guilty by a jury.
Wow.
So if you're doing something like that on your property where you're using paint or some other fluid that has to be cleaned off of brushes or flushed out of tanks or things like that, you better have some place that catches this stuff, and you better dispose of it properly. If you don't know how to do it, hire somebody who knows how to do it and is well versed in how to take care of environmental issues like that.
I think people think, I own this property, I can do what I want on it. But that's really not the case. I mean, you still have to conform to a lot of laws. What about people who want to go outside and swim in their swimming pool out back in the nude? Is that okay? Let your 10-year-old child go out in their underwear and play? Is that stuff okay?
Well, if you're doing it privately in the privacy of your backyard and you're not violating a city ordinance, then I don't see there being a problem. But you better be careful on lines of sight and so forth. If you have neighbors and your neighbors have children, and then they have second and third floor window views of your backyard.
Oh, yeah.
You
don't want to be
probably
swimming naked.
You probably should not be doing that.
All right. Good thing for homeowners to know if they were thinking about that in the hot tubs, right?
That's correct.
So tell me, what are the main cases that you see in your court?
The number one case that's being filed now is possession of drugs or like marijuana and pills and things like that. That's one. Number two is DWI. Number three is theft. And those are the top three. And the fourth is maybe a distant fourth would be domestic violence, and then all the other kinds of cases that you would find out there. We're seeing also a rash of cruelty to animals cases lately.
So, okay, when a neighbor's dog is barking and it's just driving you crazy, is there anything you can do about that?
First thing you should try to do is try to peaceably talk with your neighbor and get it resolved on your own. And that's not easy for most people to do. But it's something that you should try to do. And if you can't do it, or you don't have the personality to be able to approach somebody about an issue like that, check with your homeowners association.
Let them do
and a lot
it.
of times the homeowners association has rules of their own, bylaws, and you should check your homeowners
send
association
them a letter
agreement.
and start that whole
They can
process.
send a letter and start that process. If that doesn't get resolved, of course, you certainly, within the city of Houston limits, or in most cities, have a noise ordinance that addresses noisy animals after, say, 10 or 11 o'clock at night till about 7 in the morning. And then you should, make a report. But I would do that as a last ditch effort in trying to get it resolved directly with the other homeowner.
Yeah. And what about, can you poison someone's dog if they're tearing up your shrubbery or intimidating your kids?
No, you cannot do that. If you set out a poison trap for an animal that's coming over and digging up your flowers, you could, if it's proven, you could be found guilty of cruelty to animals. And
you can go to jail for that, right?
Up to 1 year in the Harris County Jail and a $4,000 fine for killing a domesticated animal like that.
So don't try that trick.
Don't do it. No.
All right. What about trees? A lot of property owners have trees in the neighbor's yard, and they start growing over, they start climbing kind of onto their roof, and they want to get them cut back. Is that okay to do that?
You have an absolute right to protect your property from someone else's property that's encroaching onto your land. And it starts at the property line. And so you certainly have a right to saw off limbs that are causing possible issues with your property.
Okay. And also, I want to ask you about people who put traps in their house in case somebody breaks in. Let's talk about that.
Can't do that in Texas.
You cannot
set up a spring gun, is what we called those cases years ago.
Kind of like a booby trap in your house.
You're only allowed to use deadly force if the person who's using the deadly force reasonably believes that deadly force is immediately necessary to stop the other person's use of force or attempted use of force or threatened use of force. A machine cannot have a reasonable belief. Therefore, you cannot use deadly force in the form of a spring gun or a trap gun where a human being is not there in charge of it.
Real quickly, tell me the difference between a misdemeanor and a criminal violation.
A misdemeanor and a felony. Misdemeanor case is punishable up to a year in jail. Those are the cases that I handle in our court, Court 4. Felony cases are punishable by prison time, up from state jail felony 6 months to 2 years in state jail prison, up to life imprisonment or the death penalty in a capital case.
All right, November 4th, we want people to come out and re-elect you, Judge Jay Karahan. November 4th, make sure you go out and re-elect Judge Jay. And give us your website.
It's www.judgejkarahan.com.
Spell Karahan for him.
Karahan.
All right, fantastic. We appreciate you coming on the show, and I appreciate you giving us some great information for both homeowners and landlords. Very important.
Thanks, Shannon.
All right, we appreciate it. If you are a tenant out there renting a property, make sure you're adhering to all the laws. And if you own a property, you definitely want to adhere to all the laws as well. You are listening to Houston Real Estate Radio. We're here every Sunday between 11 and 12 o'clock to answer all of your real estate questions. We'll be right back here on Houston Real Estate Radio.